Welcome to Post-Growth Perspectives on Biodiversity Conservation. I am Joeri Sol, and it is my honor and pleasure to welcome you to today's symposium. I want to start by thanking all of our speakers in advance. I wish to thank my fellow co-organizers Carmen Capendale, Crelis Rammelt, and Kenneth Rijsdijk. And a thank you to the University of Amsterdam's A Sustainable Future for funding the symposium. Good morning to most of you, good afternoon, good evening, or good night to some of you as well. I'm logging in from La Cruz de Guanacaste, Mexico, where it is currently 2 a.m. In short, this is because my wife is Mexican and visa issues and COVID restrictions do not allow her to travel to the Netherlands currently. Due to these circumstances, I'm looking forward to a night for the love of biodiversity. During this welcome, I'll go over the program with some updates. I'll briefly go into 3 questions, go over some Zoom etiquette, and introduce our first speaker of today, Iago Otero Armengol. Yes. The program remains as announced before the lunch break, where Iago's presentation on conservation and transformation is followed by the first contributed paper session. After a short break, we will follow with the second keynote by James Allen, followed by another break and a contributed workshop. In both contributed paper sessions after the lunch break, we have had one change of speaker. I will replace Jack Sykes, who is absent due to unforeseen circumstances in fieldwork, and Donny McLurkin will replace Sharona Jurgens, who could not join due to personal circumstances. We close today with Ashish Kotari. What are post-growth perspectives? I would argue that post-growth perspectives are those that consider economic growth an undesirable policy objective. Amongst these perspectives, one might distinguish the following flavors. A growth that argues for all other policy objectives and is agnostic towards economic growth. D growth that argues for a reduction in economic activity. Steady state economics that argues for zero growth once within ecological boundaries, and system dynamics that study circumstances that keep our economies from spiraling. Why focus on biodiversity? The Intergovernmental Panel, Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, in short IPBES, reported in 2019 that human activities have altered most ecosystems to the extent that a quarter of plant and animal life is pushed to the brink of extinction. Diaz et al. Show that this extinction threat affects most taxonomic groups. Globally, the current extinction rate likely exceeds the natural rate 1,000 times. Biodiversity matters because ecosystems that are richer in biodiversity have been found to be more efficient and stable. Biodiversity loss has been linked to higher rates of infectious disease. Biodiversity is thought to have large option value for the development of medicine. And many of us consider conservation important for species, their intrinsic value. Yet conservation budgets that were insufficient to start with are increasingly under threat around the world with the COVID pandemic. Why do post-growth perspectives matter for biodiversity conservation? First, because human activities are driving the heightened extinction rates. The IPBES report lists as most important drivers of biodiversity loss changes to land use, harvesting, climate change, other forms of pollution such as nitrogen pollution, invasive alien species. And second, there is no evidence of global green growth, nor evidence of absolute decoupling of economic growth and environmental impact. Third, Post-growth perspectives and scenarios are currently missing from international policy and climate conservation policy and climate policy documents. Here you can see the references that I used in full for further reading. Slides are available on request, or you can pause in the recording afterwards. That leaves me with a small recap on some Zoom etiquette during the symposium. First, note that the meeting is being recorded because we wish to share the presentations afterwards. Please mute your mic during the talks of others. Raise your hand for clarifying questions. It is up to the speakers when to take these questions. And for other questions and suggestions, please post them in the chat or keep them until the discussion. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker of today. We invited Iago Ortega Armengol because he is the lead author of Biodiversity Policy Beyond Growth, which appeared around the time we started with the organization of our symposium in 2020. Iago obtained his PhD with the Autonomous University of Barcelona in 2010 and is currently research officer with the Interdisciplinary Center of Mountain Research at University of Lausanne. Iago's interest in degrowth predates his 2020 publication. In 2015, he wrote in joint work with Viviana Azara and co-authors, "If we are to guarantee a sustainable and just future for present and future generations, why should our economies grow?" The 2020 article is more pronounced in rejecting growth by saying that the unreflexive growth emphasis of biodiversity and sustainability policies seems to stand in the way of safeguarding biodiversity. His latest work centers around how nature-based solutions can be used to achieve transformative change and how the success of nature-based solutions in turn depends on people. I believe he will draw from this work in his talk entitled Conservation and Transformation. We are most excited and honored that you will open our symposium. Iago, the floor is yours.